This all went down back in 2018 when I was in 7th grade at the middle school. I'm not gonna name it here, just to keep things private, like those stories you hear from other people. It was one of those drizzly Midwest days, in a quiet suburb near Chicago, Illinois, where the sky stays overcast and the wind cuts right through your jacket. I remember it well because it was right around midterms and I was stressing about my history test. Our social studies teacher, Mr. Patel, I think, though names blur after all these years, was a tough grader, and I'd barely studied. The school was your typical suburban setup, 2 stories with a chain link fence around it, and a strip of woods out back that connected to a nature trail. Kids always joked about those woods being haunted or something, but honestly, nothing ever really happened there. Until that day, it was about 10:30 a.m., second period, and we were in the middle of a group project in social studies. The classroom was buzzing quietly with papers shuffling and a few kids whispering about their weekend plans. I was working on my part, trying to focus, when the intercom suddenly buzzed to life. My principal's voice came on, calm but with a sharp edge that made my stomach drop. "Attention, all staff and students. We are going into lockdown immediately. This is not a drill. Please move to your designated safe areas and remain silent." The room went dead quiet in an instant, everyone freezing with eyes darting around to each other. Lockdown drills were routine for us. We'd done at least 3 that year alone, thanks to all the scary news about school shootings. But this one felt different, because there was no warning, no mention of it being a practice run. Mr. Patel stood up fast, his face draining of color as he instructed us to get under the desks right away. He turned off the lights and locked the door, plunging the room into a dim gloom, where only faint light filtered through the blinds. I scrambled under the heavy oak desk, cramming into the cramped space with my knees jammed against my chest. The air felt thick with the smell of chalk dust and old books, and I could hear my own heartbeat thumping loudly in my ears, like it was trying to drown out everything else. We'd practiced this procedure 100 times. Huddle in the corner away from the windows, stay as low as possible, and just wait for the all clear. But sitting there in the darkness amplified every little thing, making the minutes stretch out endlessly. 5 minutes passed, then 10, and there were still no updates over the intercom, no sounds of sirens outside to reassure us. Kids started shifting uncomfortably around the room, and I heard a soft cough from the back that was quickly stifled. My mind was racing with possibilities. Maybe it was just a fight in the hall, or a bomb threat from some prankster. But deep down I knew it could be worse. I'd been scrolling through those Reddit threads about real lockdowns, stories from kids who hid while SWAT teams swept the halls, or escaped convicts wandered too close to the school grounds. Our town wasn't known for much crime, but the woods behind the building connected straight to the highway, and I'd heard a news story that very morning about a guy breaking out of the county jail just a few miles away. They said he was a murderer, armed and dangerous, and the thought of him being out there made my stomach twist into knots. I pressed my ear against the cold floor, straining to listen for any clues from outside. The rain was pattering steadily against the windows, which masked a lot of sounds. But then I heard it. Footsteps crunching through the wet leaves in the woods behind us. They were slow and deliberate, like someone pushing carefully through the underbrush, testing every step. My skin prickled all over as a chill ran down my spine. Was he circling the building, looking for a way in? My eyes adjusted to the shadows just enough to see the fear in the faces around me, and I nodded slightly when I caught someone's gaze, confirming that they heard it too. My heart was pounding even harder now, each beat echoing in my chest. The footsteps paused right below our window, and in my mind, I could picture a shadowy figure in a soaked hoodie peering up at the school, maybe even sizing up our classroom. What if he had a gun? What if he decided to break in right there? Panic started to bubble up among the group. A girl in the room let out a tiny whimper and quickly clamped her hand over her mouth to muffle it. Mr. Patel tried to shush her gently, but I could see he was sweating, his eyes flicking nervously to the door every few seconds. He'd pulled out his phone, but there was no signal in the lockdown zone, and we'd all been told to keep ours off to avoid any lights giving us away. Whispers began to ripple through the clusters of kids. Something about a shooter in the parking lot, or a prisoner spotted near the trail. Someone hissed to shut up before we got in trouble. The footsteps came again, even closer to the building this time, accompanied by the rustle of branches snapping underfoot. Then, cutting through the rain, came a low voice, muffled and distant, but clear enough to send ice through my veins. "Hey, anyone in there?" It wasn't a yell, just casual, like someone calling out to a friend on the street. But in that moment, it froze my blood completely. Was he testing the windows, trying to lure someone out into the open? I don't know exactly how long we sat like that, maybe 45 minutes, but it felt like an eternity with my legs going numb and sweat trickling down my back despite the chill in the air. The voice called out one more time, then fell silent, leaving only the steady drum of the rain. Finally, after what seemed like forever, the intercom crackled back to life. "All clear. The situation has been resolved. Teachers escort students to the auditorium for dismissal." A wave of shaky relief washed over the room, but it didn't fully settle the knot in my gut. Mr. Patel unlocked the door cautiously, peeking out into the hall before leading us in a single file line, keeping our hands visible like we were in some kind of movie. Cops were everywhere outside, uniforms swarming the parking lot with yellow tape fluttering in the wind. We were herded into the gym, where parents rushed in to grab their kids, and my mom was there waiting, her face pale as she pulled me into a tight hug. "What happened?" I asked her, but she just shook her head and said, "They caught someone. Don't worry about it." Dismissal turned into total chaos. Kids chattering and some even crying, while parents yelled at the principal for more details. As I walked home, still buzzing with adrenaline, that's when I saw it. In the woods across from the school, partially hidden by the dripping trees, a figure standing completely still. Tall, dressed in dark clothes, just watching the crowd of students leaving. I couldn't make out the face, but the way he stood there, observing everything, made my blood run cold again. The cops were right nearby, but the figure didn't move at all, just stared as I backed away slowly and then ran the rest of the way home. Later that night, I pieced together what had really happened from the local news and what my parents told me. The escaped prisoner, a guy who'd killed his neighbor during a robbery gone wrong, had been spotted near the school trail that morning. He'd hopped the fence, wandered through the woods, and even tried a side door before the lockdown was called. The police had swept the area, but he managed to slip away before they could catch him. Resolved apparently just meant they thought he was gone, with no arrest or confirmation, only that the situation was handled. School reopened the next day as if nothing had happened, but things felt off from the start. During recess, everyone avoided the woods like the plague. The teachers seemed jumpier too, peeking out the windows more often than usual. And for me, I kept looking over my shoulder constantly. To this day, I still wonder about it. Those woods by the school don't feel so innocent anymore. And on rainy days, I swear I can hear those footsteps, echoing in the distance, getting a little closer each time. This happened in my junior year of high school, back in 2019. My school was one of those sprawling, single-story types built in the 70s, with a main building and a bunch of portable classrooms out back for the overflow. I had English in one of them, Portable 4. It was right at the edge of the school property, separated from the parking lot by a thin strip of patchy grass. It was a Tuesday in early spring, one of those gray, drizzly days where the sky just feels heavy. We were about 20 minutes into class, trying to stay awake, while our English teacher was talking about The Great Gatsby. I was sitting near the windows, which was usually the best seat, but on that day there wasn't much to see besides wet pavement. That's when I noticed him. There was a man standing on the sidewalk just beyond the grass, near the edge of the teacher's parking lot. He wasn't doing anything, just standing in the light rain, facing our portable. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with thinning gray hair plastered to his head by the rain. He wore a faded, dark green jacket that looked way too thin for the weather. It wasn't immediately terrifying, just weird. You get the occasional parent waiting to pick up their kid, but this was the middle of second period. A few other kids noticed him, and a low murmur started spreading through the class. The teacher stopped talking and squinted towards the window. He was a pretty laid-back guy, but you could see his whole posture change. He walked over, peered through the blinds, and his face tightened. He tried to be casual about it. He stepped out of the classroom for a moment, and we all heard the muffled sound of him speaking on his phone in the tiny hallway that connected our portable to the one next door. When he came back in, he didn't look at us. He just walked to the classroom door, locked it, and then went around the room, closing all the blinds with sharper, angry tugs. "All right, everyone," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We're just going to continue class. Keep your voices down." Nobody was thinking about Gatsby anymore. We were all just listening. The silence in the room was thick. All you could hear was the rain, tapping on the metal roof and the hum of the fluorescent lights. Then, a new sound started. It was faint at first, a low, staticky noise. It sounded like a radio that wasn't tuned to a station. It was coming from right outside our window. I risked a tiny peek through a crack in the blinds. The man was still there, but now he was sitting cross-legged on the wet grass, maybe 10 feet from our wall. He was holding a small, old-fashioned transistor radio, the kind with a silver antenna, and he was just staring at our portable. The static fizzled and popped for a minute straight. Then it stopped, replaced by a piece of classical music. It was a melancholy piano song I didn't recognize. He just let it play, the tinny notes getting warped and distorted by the cheap speaker. It was the strangest, most unsettling thing. He wasn't yelling, he wasn't trying to get in. He was just sitting in the rain, giving us a private concert. That's when the principal's voice came over the intercom, and my stomach dropped. It wasn't the calm voice. It was clipped and tense. "Attention, staff. We are now in a hard lockdown. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." Our teacher didn't even hesitate. He flicked off the lights and hissed, "Everyone away from the windows. Get against the back wall now." We scrambled out of our seats, huddling together in the dark on the floor. My heart was pounding in my chest. Outside, the piano music stopped. It was replaced by that awful static again. But that never happened. Instead, the radio outside crackled to life with a new sound. It was the distorted, high-pitched sound of a children's choir. It was a terrible quality recording, like it was taped from a distance and the voices warbled in and out. He just played it on a loop, over and over. The static, the innocent song, the rain on the roof. It felt like a scene from a nightmare. We had no idea who he was or what he wanted. The fact that his threat was so passive, so bizarre, made it a million times scarier. We sat there in the dark for what felt like an eternity, listening to that song. Finally, we heard the distant wail of sirens getting closer. The radio outside abruptly clicked off. We heard muffled shouting, but it wasn't the man's voice. It was the police. After about 20 more minutes of total silence, an officer with a key unlocked our door and told us it was over. They escorted us from the portable back to the main building's gymnasium, not telling us anything. We eventually found out the man had surrendered without a fight. They just took him. No weapons, nothing. For weeks, that was all anyone knew. He was just some random crazy person. But what still gets me, the part I can't shake, came out in a local news article about a month later. They identified the man. He had been a student at our high school back in the early 80s and had severe mental health issues. But the article mentioned one detail that the police report included. The transistor radio he was holding had a cassette player in it. And the tape they found inside? It wasn't a commercial recording. The audio of the children's choir had been secretly recorded at a district-wide elementary school concert held in our school's auditorium the year before. He had been on campus before. He had been watching and listening. We never found out why he chose our portable that day, or what he was planning to do next. But the thought that he wasn't just some random person, that he had a specific, incomprehensible reason to be there, playing that horrible recording for us, that's something that stays with you. It's the not knowing that's the worst part. I had just started my junior year of high school in 2023. I went to a mid-sized school in rural Pennsylvania, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and nothing major ever really happens. It was a Wednesday in late October. We were in the middle of taking notes on the Revolutionary War when someone knocked on the classroom door. Not like a normal knock either. It was hard, urgent. My teacher stopped mid-sentence and walked over. He opened the door just a crack, and I saw one of the ladies from the front office. She was our attendance secretary, usually super cheerful, but her face looked pale and she was whispering really fast. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I watched his expression change. He nodded a few times, then closed the door and locked it. I knew something was wrong. Teachers don't just lock doors in the middle of class. He walked to his desk and picked up the phone. His voice was calm, but I could tell he was forcing it. "All right, everyone, we're going into lockdown. I need everyone to move to the back corner away from the windows. Now." The room went dead silent except for chairs scraping. My heart started pounding. We all moved to the back left corner of the room where there weren't any windows. My teacher turned off the lights and pulled down the shades. Then he pushed his desk in front of the door. Someone whispered, "What's happening?" But he just put his finger to his lips. We sat there in the dark. Then we heard it. Yelling. A man's voice. Loud and angry. Coming from somewhere in the building. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. He was furious. Then we heard banging, like someone slamming their fists on lockers or doors as they walked down the hallway. It got louder. Closer. A girl next to me started crying quietly. Another kid took out his phone and I saw his hands shaking as he texted someone, probably his parents. The yelling got clearer. The man was screaming a name. "Brianna, I know you're here." My stomach dropped. Brianna was a girl in our grade. She was in my English class. Quiet, kept to herself. I didn't know her well, but I'd seen her around. The banging continued. It sounded like he was going door to door, trying handles, hitting the walls. At one point, he was right outside our classroom. I could hear his breathing. Heavy, ragged. He tried our door handle. It didn't open. Then he kicked it hard. The whole door shook. My teacher stood up and positioned himself between us and the door. I'll never forget that. He didn't say anything. He just stood there. The man kicked it again and again. I thought the door was going to break. Then we heard another voice. Deep. Someone else was in the hallway with him now. There was yelling, scuffling sounds. Then everything went quiet for just a second. That's when we heard the gunshot. It was so loud even from inside the classroom with the door closed. It was deafening. A sharp crack that echoed through the whole building. Someone screamed. I don't even know if it was in our room or somewhere else. Everything felt like it was moving in slow motion. We all pressed ourselves against the wall. A few people were sobbing now. I remember thinking, this is it. This is how I die. In the back corner of a history classroom. Then there was more shouting. Footsteps running. Chaos. We stayed frozen in that corner. It felt like an hour, but it was probably only about 15 more minutes before the principal's voice came over the intercom. The lockdown has been lifted. All students and staff are safe. Please remain in your classrooms until further notice. Nobody moved at first. Then slowly, my teacher turned the lights back on. Some kids were crying. Others just stared at the floor. Later, we found out what happened. Brianna's ex-boyfriend, a 19-year-old who had dropped out the year before, had driven to the school looking for her. Apparently, she'd broken up with him a few weeks earlier, and he'd been harassing her ever since. That morning, he showed up at the front entrance demanding to see her. When the office staff refused and tried to call the police, he pushed past them and started searching the building. He had a gun. Our school resource officer confronted him in the main hallway. The ex-boyfriend fired one shot into the ceiling before officer tackled him to the ground and disarmed him. He was arrested and charged with a list of things I don't even remember. Assault with a deadly weapon was definitely one of them. Brianna didn't come back to school for 2 weeks. When she did, she looked different, tired, scared. What messed me up the most was thinking about what would have happened if our door hadn't been locked, or if he'd found her classroom first. I still think about that sometimes,